Hey everybody, it's your friend Adam. I'm here with TJump. John Buck is actually going to be joining us in a few minutes to basically just moderate in case we get off topic. This is round two of a debate we had on modern day debate where we kind of got sidetracked in this thought experiment. And I thought the thought experiment was very interesting. And we ended up chatting about it on Twitter. A lot of people commented about it in the comments. So I think we're going to explore that idea a little bit more. Am I correct? Is that a good assessment, Tom?
Sounds good to me.
So I the thought, do you want to lay out your thought experiment again? Actually, I put together basically a steel man of your position. So I'm going to try to state your position clearly so that we are on the same page here. And then I'll let you set up the thought experiment again that you laid out on modern day debate, and we can go from there. How's that?
Sounds good.
So your position is basically, and we're talking about ethics. This debate was on Jordan Peterson truth, so we're talking about whether or not Jordan Peterson truth is useful. Some people have called it metaphorical truth. That's what Brett Weinstein calls it. This is an idea that believing something that is untrue could provide you a survival advantage over the long haul. And I think the crux of your thought experiment is basically you're saying that a smaller group, I think we agree that groups are united by ethics, that ethics are what seal a group of people together. Is that your position?
I would agree, yes.
Okay. So we're in agreement there. So, but your position is that a smaller group with a better, and I realize better is subjective, but a better set of ethics could potentially be suppressed by a larger group with a worse set of ethics, and worse in quotes, air quotes, obviously, because that's subjective. And this larger group could convert people by force, and that force could range from physical violence to social coercion. So this smaller group that has the better ethics could not actually get started because the larger group would go around subjugating them, the group with the worse ethics.
Correct.
So I have your position clear.
Yes.
Okay. So
I could clarify a little bit if you wanted.
okay, go ahead. Yeah.
All right. So you were, just to start off where you did, you write that the ethics are essentially the group or the binding principles that a society uses in order to guide the society. And so there can be lots of different ethics. So if we imagine like the world as it started off or something with a whole bunch of different ethics, then they can compete. And if they're purely voluntary, so everyone just chooses to join an ethic without any coercion, then the ethic that's better is going to win out and gain popularity. So we can like assign numbers to these popularities or these ethics and say there's a whole bunch of twos, a whole bunch of ethics that are twos, and there's this ethic that's a 5. And if everything's purely voluntary, then the ethic that's a 5 is going to gain all of the adherents. They're all going to start following the 5 because the 5 is a better ethic.
Well, we're confusing. Sorry to interrupt you, but we're confusing the matter just a tiny bit because obviously societies have a lot of different ethics at play, right? So not only is it just one ethic, it's like a list of ethics could win out over a different list of ethics, right?
Right. I'm just compiling all of those into just one ethic, one societal ethic, just to make it simple.
Okay. So the list of ethics are A, B, C, D, and E, but that list you're just saying is the overarching ethic.
Right, like comparing like the Christian ethic, which is made up of a whole bunch of different individual ethics, as opposed to like the Islamic ethic, which is a whole bunch of different individual ethics. I'm just going to compile those into just the one ethic and the other ethic, and just classify those as groups.
Perfect.
So we have like ethics that are 2s and ethics that is a 5. And if in a purely voluntary society, everyone is going to go to the 5 because the 5 is a better ethic in a voluntary society. Now I'm 100% okay with that. All of that is perfectly fine. Totally agree with the JP ethic on that one. However, there's another possibility. This ethic that's a 5 could be around for a really long time, like it won out against all of the 2s, and it's grown to have millions of people, millions of followers. And then this new ethic is invented by somebody. This new ethic is people are converting to this new ethic. They're going from the old ethic that was a 5 to this new ethic. So this new ethic is a bigger number, like a 10 or something.
Right.
But the 5 still has a whole bunch more people because it's been around for longer. So it's got a ton of followers. And the 5 doesn't like the fact that everyone's converting to this new, better ethic that's better in a voluntary society. So it decides to use its force and its greater numbers to suppress this better ethic. Now, that I'm not okay with. That's the part where I disagree with the JP ethic. I would not classify this as a better ethic just because it can use its greater numbers to suppress the ethic that's better in a voluntary society. I think a better ethic is the one that people choose to adopt in a purely voluntary society without coercion. So you brought up the example in our Twitter conversation about if the Nazis won World War II and they took over the world, would their ethic really be better? Now, by my definition, I would say no, because they had to use coercion. Now, what would you say about that, and what do you think the JP Darwinian ethic would say about that?
See, that's the contention that us Jordan Peterson fans are continually banding about, because the question really is, could the Nazis have won the war? Could that ethic sustain itself? Because we believe that there are internal flaws in that ethic, and a lot of it comes down to the question of coercion. Because if the larger population has the ethic inside the greater ethic that it is okay to oppress people, it's okay to subjugate people, then that becomes a weakening of the overall arching ethic of the group, and that group is in danger of breaking apart because of that ethic is so caustic. People rebel against that idea of being subjugated. And a lot of the books that I've read, Why Nations Fail in particular, he goes into detail with tons of examples of how, I mean, this is why the North won the war, the Civil War in America, because the South, they had that ethic of subjugation, and that subjugation just ties up so much of your human resources. Like the guy who could potentially invent some new innovation that could take their economy past what was going on in the North. Turns out he's black, he's a slave, he's oppressed. So that innovation that could have been had is lost. So I think really what we're honing in on is that one ethic, that subjugation ethic. And it was something that seemed very important to your thought experiment. I'm not sure that what you're suggesting is possible. I'm interested that it might be, but and this is kind of why the debate broke down a bit, because it was just like the idea that why don't you go ahead and lay out the thought experiment we're talking about? I don't think we've laid it out yet.
I don't remember what exactly was the phrasing in the debate.
Okay, it was basically there were two tribes that were going to war, and there was a larger tribe and a smaller tribe, and the larger tribe had the ethic of subjugation, right?
Yep.
And they went to the smaller tribe, and we didn't really touch on whether the smaller tribe had the ethic of subjugation, but I think it's interesting for this conversation. The larger tribe was going to subjugate the smaller tribe by force. They said convert or die was your equation. And you said, is it right for the smaller tribe to submit, which would be good for their survival? And I think your argument was submitting is wrong, but it would be wise to do in using JP truth. That's kind of the argument you were trying to make, right?
Right. Should they reject their own ethic and adopt this ethic that's trying to subjugate them?
Right. Well, the questions, though, that I immediately had was because these ethics are what facilitate tribes even getting larger, even growing larger. Because an ethic that's voluntary, I believe, will have a larger adherence than an ethic that is forced subjugation. Like if you were just a random person choosing between Islam and Christianity, and you knew that you could test drive Christianity with no downside for apostates, right? If you're a Christian and you decide to leave, no one's going to give you a hard time. But if you join Islam, the rule is kill all apostates, right? That's going to affect your decision, right? You think maybe I'll test drive Christianity. I don't want to get in that Islam thing if if I decide I don't like it. So I think that will inherently draw more people to Christianity. And if they dislike it and can you mute yourself, Tom?
Because that's
Or
John, I
John,
think.
rather.
John
Yeah.
joined.
So John's not on camera, but you'll be able to hear his voice if he speaks up. So if I lost my train of thought when John popped in. Do you remember where we were?
Uh,
Your
John's
mic is not working, John. Yeah. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but so
right. You were saying that you don't think it's possible that an ethic that has the subjugation mantra is going to grow to be better because it's going to deter people from joining it and make it less likely to grow as an ethic.
correct. But I think your thought experiment does actually hold true in the past when all ethics had the subjugation ethic embedded in them. The subjugation meme was embedded in the overall ethic. So, for example, when the Spanish conquistadors came over to America, they landed actually in South America where the Aztecs and Incans were. The Aztec and Incan society already had the subjugation ethic embedded in them. They had a society that was run by elites. They had like human sacrifice. They had basically the elites had the lower classes under their thumb. So when the Spanish conquistadors came over, who also had the subjugation ethic, all they did was behead the leaders, the elites, and all of the infrastructure was already in place for them to become the new elites. So they just basically took over that group who already had that ethic. When the English came over, they were planning on doing the exact same thing, but they showed up in Plymouth Rock where the Native Americans didn't have a society that was structured where the elites controlled everything. They had small tribes, and these small tribes had a very egalitarian mindset. So even the people that they showed up to, they themselves, the English, had the subjugation meme. They showed up there. The people started dying off. They realized, well, they had planned actually to be fed by the natives. But the Native Americans were like, no, we're not going to have this. Okay, we don't have this subjugation thing. And even the English settlers, if they weren't happy, if they were subjugated too much, they could run off and live with the Native Americans. So it was a completely different situation. And that actually facilitated the growth of egalitarianism, the growth of pluralism in America. This is why we have this pluralist society here, why we have more of a voluntary system. So I think what you're saying is interesting, but what I'm really looking for is the example of this where a society has the subjugation meme, is larger, and snuffs out a smaller society.
I can use the examples you provided, the one where the conquistadors went to South America.
Mm-hmm.
Diego de Landa was converting the Aztecs and the Mayans to Christianity,
Yes.
but they were not adopting Christianity or the Christian God as the only God. They only added it to their list of gods. And when de Landa found out about this, he decided to kill them all. He just wiped them out and destroyed their entire language, burning down every piece of codex that we could use to learn how to speak it, completely destroying the language until just recently. So it was gone. And they had forced conversions where they would force the kids to go to the Christian schools, not use their language. And they did this in the Native Americans, and the Inuits in Canada did the same thing, where they were forced to go to English-speaking schools and Catholic schools and to not use their native language. So that applied all in the North and South America, where they did this, where they forced all of these people to convert to Christendom or to die. That was their option. And like you said, in the South Americans, they essentially converted somewhat. And in North America, they just died. A lot of them died. The Trail of Tears. I think a large percent of the population of Native Americans died off because they did not convert. They were killed.
My problem, though, is that both of those societies had the ethic of subjugation.
Why does that make a difference?
Because the ethic of subjugation is the thing that is toxic, that is not going to, a society that doesn't have the ethic. My argument is that a society that doesn't have the ethic of subjugation is eventually, over the long haul, going to outcompete a society that does have the ethic of subjugation.
Well,
So,
then I would give examples like Jainism and Buddhism, which do not have the ethic of subjugation, and they're losing out, and they were forcibly converted to Christianity because it did have the subjugation ethic.
okay, I don't know much about Jainism, but this is where it becomes more complex because there are other factors in play as well. So if two societies are competing on, both societies have the ethic of non-subjugation. I don't know. I don't know a better term for that. But both societies have the ethic of non-subjugation. Live and let live. Okay. Then they will be defaulting to other ethics that they are competing on. Maybe one has a better ethic of forgiveness, which is a pro-social thing, and the other society has an ethic of revenge. So if two societies are competing in the marketplace for resources and members, and both societies do not subjugate people, but one society is more forgiving of transgressors and the other society is more vengeful and revengeful, then they're effectively competing on the second ethic, not on the first, because they agree on the first.
Okay, so then I can give you examples where there's one has the subjugation ethic and one does not have the subjugation ethic. Like in the early Roman Empire,
Yeah, but
when
that example's off the table. Sorry to interrupt again, but I mean, that, do you understand how that, if, okay, no, you're saying you're saying that they're both unequal, but they have the different ethic. Sorry, I misheard you.
right, so one of them has subjugation and one of them does not have subjugation.
Right.
So if you're saying that you believe the subjugation ethic makes an ethic worse, and so the ethic that has the subjugation will lose to the ethic that does not have the subjugation.
Right.
That's your argument.
Right.
And I can give historical examples where that's false, where it's the exact opposite, in fact, pretty much universally throughout history. Like, for example, most pacifist religions, most pacifist ethics lose to ethics that are warmongering, like the Mongols. The Mongols just conquered everybody, whether they had a subjugation ethic or not. Alexander the Great conquered everybody, whether they had subjugation or not. The British had a subjugation ethic. They conquered like the entire world, regardless of whether or not you have a subjugation ethic or not. So, and these apply to just every ethic across the world. If you have more power and you have a subjugation ethic, then your ethic will spread by force. And we can look at there's several YouTube videos of just the spread of Christianity and the spread of the Western society. It all directly correlates to war. The Crusades was one of the biggest spreaders in the middle century. The invasion of Africa by the British and the conquering of Africa is where it spread in Africa. The invasion of North America and South America by the conquistadors and the Americans is how it spread into North America. It's all directly related to conquest for the vast majority of the spreading of the religion, with a couple exceptions like Japan, who adopted it voluntarily for the most part.
So what, I'm a little confused on what this thought experiment tells us about now, because we look at the world now and it's obvious the societies that have the non-subjugation ethic are outcompeting the societies that do have the subjugation ethic. Do we agree on that?
Sort of. Well, here's where it comes in. If you imagine there's a society that has the subjugation ethic and uses it to conquer the world, and then someday they said, okay, well, we were wrong about this when we stopped the subjugation ethic. The next day, they no longer adopt the subjugation ethic, but they're still winning because of the subjugation ethic. So the reason they're the most popular is because they've been subjugating people for all these years, and the fact they just gave it up doesn't mean that their society is now better off or that their ethic is winning because they're non-subjugation ethics. They're just currently winning because of all of the past years of subjugation. Now, if you're right in that a subjugation ethic makes a ethic less palatable for people, then as soon as they stop adopting the subjugation ethic, then they're going to start to losing adherence. They're going to start to decrease and losing them to other ethics that don't have the subjugation ethic. Would you agree with that part? Do you follow everything I'm saying?
Well, the reason why I think the subjugation ethic is a problem is because the members will defect to other groups that don't have the subjugation ethic. So, like, the question really is, how do they maintain their numbers in a society, in a world group where different societies are competing? The societies, I mean, I completely agree with you that the subjugation ethic could increase their numbers. I mean, this is why the whole idea of cultural evolution is interesting, because an entire culture can change its ethics where you can't really change the biological genes in the organisms making that society up. The rules that bind that society together can change and do change. I mean, in the book The Secret of Our Success by Joseph Henrich, he talks about societies that are tribal societies that are failing. They're failing to survive, they're failing to produce resources, and they look around them and there's other competing tribes that are doing great. And they even send out their elders to find out why this society is doing so good. And they basically adopt all of their traditions and just start living exactly like they're living. And the funny thing is, like, he cites this one society where the women pray, or not pray, but the women sing to the pigs. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily know, being a rationalist materialist, if singing to the pigs is something that's necessary to facilitate a stronger society, but they just adopt it because they really don't know what it is that's making this tribe successful. And within a generation, the tribe is totally turned around and is totally successful. So that is just an interesting example of how people are willing to adopt ethics when they're under the gun and voluntarily. So your thought experiment, though, I mean, you basically said that these people, the smaller ethic, is being put to the sword. It's like convert or die, join us or die. There's so many different outcomes that are possible there. Suppose the smaller group pretends to convert, and they are from within fomenting revolution. That's a possibility. This is really a long-term situation. People in the comments had even said that, I mean, you're reducing everything to this battle, and the idea behind Jordan Peterson truth is that it's a truth that is more true because it's survived over a long period of time. But that could change. The environment could change. The situation could change. The social environment could change, and that ethic could no longer be useful.
Right, but my example is just directly taken from history. So we've seen this happen throughout history.
Right.
So
But
if you're
my original, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
Well, because you said that the subjugation ethic is a bad thing, and if they have the subjugation ethic, how does the ethic grow? Because no one would want to join it. Well, it's like if you have competing ethics, like a whole bunch of 2s and one 5, but the 5 has a subjugation ethic, and that makes it like a 4. So it makes it worse, but it's still better than all of the other ethics at the time period. So people would still choose to join this one voluntarily, and they would be forced to in other realms where they didn't choose to join it voluntarily. So they'd still be able to get converts, even though they had the subjugation ethic, because it's still better than the worse ethics. So that's what my view is that Christianity is kind of like the 5, where it has subjugation, so it's not perfect, but it conquers a lot of people who don't convert, and there are lots of people who do choose to convert voluntarily. And they did this for thousands of years. Now Christianity is like the most popular religion in the world because of the subjugation ethic. But of course, lots of people chose to join voluntarily because there are positive aspects to it. And now that Christianity has lost the subjugation ethic, they're saying, well, no, that's bad. We shouldn't do that. We should be more pacifist and not conquer the world. Now we can expect that if my portrayal of the situation is accurate, that people will now start to leave Christianity more than will convert to it. There's still positives to it, so there's still better than a lot of the 2 ethics. But there's better ethics out there that people are going to convert out of Christianity to join the better ethics. And is that what we see when we talk about Christianity? Well, yeah. If we look at the Pew data shows that there are twice as many people leaving Christianity than there are converting to Christianity, and they're leaving it to secular humanism. They're the non-belief, non-religious. So it seems like that's exactly what happened, was that Christianity took over the world by force, and now that it's no longer subjugating the better ethic of secular humanism, that ethic is now taking more of its converts. People are converting out of Christianity because it's a worth ethic voluntarily to join the better ethic of secular humanism.
So your argument is they inherited the size of the group through subjugation. And though they've abandoned that subjugation, now that ethic is weaker.
Right. Now it's because now it no longer has the subjugation propping up its numbers. They're no longer forcing people to convert. And so now they're losing converts because it's not as good of an ethic on the voluntary system as the humanist ethic. Because when in a voluntary society, when all ethics are essentially, you get to choose on your own which ethic you want to adopt. The humanistic ethic is a better ethic, and more people choose to adopt that than they choose to adopt the Christian ethic. And so now we see more people moving to that ethic out of the Christian ethic.
Now, I think that we are going to disagree on the facts, but I do understand what you were saying. And I think there's definitely some merit to that argument. The one of the facts that I looked up after our debate is that there are at present in the world there are 15 million Mormons, and the Mormons never had the subjugation ethic at all. So I'm questioning why there's 15 million Mormons and there are only 4 to 5 million secular humanists around the world. So they have them beat 3 times in group size. And the secular humanism people are not even really well defined. It's hard to get good numbers on secular humanism because they define themselves differently. So there's that problem. And I also I just studying ethics and studying moral psychology, the whole idea behind an ethic is it dictates behavior. It tells people how to behave in certain situations. And I I dived into secular humanism, and for instance, what is the secular humanist position on forgiving your enemies?
I would say that you are supposed to forgive your enemies in secular humanism.
Right. What is that grounded in? How what if another secular humanist came on the show and said, "No, I don't think you should forgive your enemies," or you should you should only forgive your enemies in certain situations, and those situations are subjective.
Right. Well, the humanism part is to value human life above everything else, essentially. So your enemy is a human, then you should value them because they're human. And so humanity itself has intrinsic value in humanism. And so it's essentially a absolute non-violent, absolute pacifist, try to promote humanity as much as possible in every respect kind of religion. So humanism advocates for the best for everyone possible given the limitations that we have. So there's no in Christianity, they think there's this value of justice and revenge, where if someone committed a crime, then they deserve to be punished. Whereas humanism says, no, they're just another determined thing, just like a bear or something. And the reason we need to put them in prison is to protect other people, not to punish them. They don't deserve a punishment. They have inherent value as a human being.
Well, I'm going to object that your characterization of Christianity. I don't think it's fair to characterize Christianity. I don't think it's fair for someone who's not a member of Christianity to look at the book, look at the Bible and say, this is the way you should behave. Obviously, the Christians disagree on that. I think you and I, both as atheists, will agree that the Bible is contradictory, right?
Right. Well, I was a Christian for almost 20 years, so I read the Bible cover to cover, so I'm pretty well versed in this stuff.
But
and one of the tenets I think that most Christians agree on is that there's this idea of justice, and there's this idea of obligation, and that God is a judge, and so that you do sin, and then this sin then makes you deserving of punishment from the judge. And that's I think most groups of Christianity agree on that part.
Well, this is a lot of the problem I have with secular humanists, because they're more interested in what Christians are doing than what they're actually doing themselves. There are there are different churches that adopt the Jesus, turn the other cheek, love thy neighbor. They're very nonviolent pacifists. There are pacifist brands of Christianity, right?
Absolutely.
There are hellfire and brimstone brands of Christianity as well. I would argue that the pacifist brands of Christianity are out competing the hellfire and brimstone, but you're still talking about very different things. And I wonder, like, what is the analog here, or what is the parallel here rather, for secular humanism? Because what makes secular humanism, what makes their ethics solid? Like, what do you turn to as a secular humanist and say, I guess you've said the valuing of human life is essential.
Absolutely, the inherent value of humanity.
Okay. Hey, I'll get to, I see I've got a couple of super chats. I'll get to the super chats, like kind of in a question and answer period towards the end. So,
Oh, well, you asked a question about Mormonism. Why is secular humanism not as popular as Mormonism? Because neither of those had the subjugation ethic.
mm-hmm.
Well, my answer to that is that atheists are still subjugated, even though not as explicitly. They're still very subjugated. Like, there was a poll done recently about what is the most distrusted group in America, and atheists are the decisively most distrusted group of all people, including Muslims, LGBT community, criminals. Atheists are just more distrusted than anybody else in the country. So there's still a lot of discrimination and subjugation of the atheist community, which is why there's a lot of studies that have been done in America of who's happier. And atheists, or religious people, are a lot happier in America than atheist people, because atheists don't have a sense of community. They're very neglected in society. They have no representation in politics. Whereas if we compare it to other countries, the atheists are actually much happier in the non-secular countries, because they have a much bigger community, much better representation in politics. So at least in America, there is still a lot of discrimination against atheists, and we are still being subjugated, which is why there's been such a slow growth, as opposed to Mormonism, which has not been openly discriminated against at the same level as atheists.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to say something. Is my mic working again?
Yeah, it works great.
Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify what your guys' definitions of subjugation is, because from my understanding, like, any ethic that a group takes on is going to be there's going to be some element of subjugation for the other person. It's like a social rule set where keeping single individual people united by having them give up certain, like, say it would be by putting up an hour of work in order to help the group survive. That's an element of the ethic subjugating themselves in that 1 hour of their personal leisure time. And just I also am curious, like, whether you would agree or not that in certain, let's say, highly liberal atheistic communities, there is still an element of subjugation for anyone not following the ethics of somebody within that community. Say, like, if you're in San Francisco and you hold to traditionalistic values or something like that, then there might be a element of subjugation within that local environment towards the person with, say, Christian values, in kind of the inverse of somebody in the Bible Belt having atheistic values being subjugated by the broader environment in that area. So it doesn't seem like there's only a singular subjugation from one ethic, rather than both ethics, depending upon the environment of the majority.
You're basically saying that there's some element of social cohesion or social coercion.
Subjugation.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I wanted to clarify what you guys are meaning. Is subjugation just causing some others not within that group to perform actions that correspond with the ethics of the majority group?
Do you want to go first?
No, go ahead.
right, so when I'm talking about subjugation, I'm talking about forced conversion of taking one ethic and then forcing people who are not of that ethic to join that ethic. Or you could also do subjugation by forcing the people who are in one particular ethic to suffer, making it harder for them, so it would be better for them if they joined the other ethic.
Sort of like a social shaming would be one version of subjugation. Right.
And to address your second question, yes, there are definitely a lot of liberals and social justice warriors who try to subjugate the right wingers and those kinds of things. That happens a lot. But since it's the atheist community is much smaller than the liberal community, so I think I would definitely classify those as different kinds of things. So because the atheist community only makes up like single-digit percentages of most of America, so they can't really subjugate much of anything right now. But you're right that there's a lot of subjugation among the political spectrum between the right and the left, where they're shaming them. Yeah, that happens a lot. You're absolutely right about that.
Okay.
I want to get back to the distrust thing, and I think it touches on the subjugation thing. Are you saying that because Christians distrust atheists, that's a form of social shaming and like a type of subjugation?
Right. They were asked, like, would you vote for an atheist for president? Everyone said no. So would you vote for an atheist for a political position? They said no. Would you trust an atheist to watch your kids? Would you trust an atheist? Would you loan them money? These kinds of questions. So they would deny services that you would normally give to anyone that you consider to be trustworthy. So they see them as a bad person, like a criminal. You wouldn't let a criminal watch your kids. Also, you wouldn't let an atheist watch your kids because you don't trust atheists. So it's they're kind of treating them as if they are outcasts in society, just like criminals.
How is forcing them to trust atheists, though, not subjugation?
Well, that would be subjugation. I don't want to force them to do anything.
Okay. So, but there's a very rational, logical reason for Christians and other groups to distrust atheists. So a lot of times I have a problem with this idea. Like, do you feel that people should just be trusted for no reason whatsoever? Don't you think people pick and choose who they're going to trust?
Oh, absolutely they do. It's part of human nature.
So the distrust thing, would you say that is a barrier for secular humanism to overcome to gain adherence? I mean, this could possibly be the reason why there's 15 million Mormons and there's only 4 to 5 million secular humanists, because nobody wants to be distrusted.
Right, exactly. You're exactly right, which is why secular humanism and atheism has been branching out and trying to gain more popularity. And you have things like the American Atheists and a whole bunch of different atheist groups doing charity work to try and make atheism look more palatable, less hateable, essentially. So yeah.
Do you know the reason why Christians distrust atheists, though? Because if they distrust atheists for reason B, and you're doing all this charity work to make yourselves appear more trustworthy, and that is not even close to the reason they distrust you, then you're kind of wasting a lot of time on this charity work.
Well, the two major reasons are, one is historical, is that atheism is opposed to the ethic of Christianity, and which has made the conflict between these two ideologies quite severe. So atheists have been persecuted by Christianity since the Roman Empire, where atheists were killed off and impaled and crucified just because they didn't believe in a God. People were convicted of this all the time. It was not a very pleasant experience they've had. And so that's one of the major reasons that atheism and Christianity or atheism is distrusted by Christianity, is because it is diametrically opposed to their worldview. The second one is because atheism was adopted by a lot of the most tyrannical governments in the 20th century. Hitler, Mao, Pol Pot, those kinds of guys were in many ways atheists, though I would definitely think that Hitler was also very Christian, and the Nazi movement was very Christian. But yes, Stalin was atheist, Mao, Pol Pot, both atheists. And so there is definitely a good reason to distrust that movement, but the current modern secular humanist community has nothing to do with that kind of atheism.
Okay, you touch on two reasons that I think are both valid reasons. The atheists are against religious people. So if someone doesn't like you, then obviously you're going to probably distrust them. The USSR failures, like the political failures, atheism being tried, state-mandated atheism being tried and failing. That's one of them. I don't even really think you're on the real reason. And the real reason, and this is why I like Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Haidt and Joseph Henrich, is because they talk about so much of this stuff in evolutionary terms. Their idea is that we evolved these gods as a cultural adaptation because they keep people honest. If you live in a community where you believe God is going to judge you for your indiscretions against people, that is going to make you a lot more honest. So the fact that you don't have this silent judge, jury, and executioner running around in your head is probably the real reason that they don't trust you. I've heard Christians articulate this. I think it's very subconscious, but I don't necessarily know how you can get around that with secular humanism.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. That would be another reason, which would be the fact that the question, well, where do atheists get their moral value? What reason do they have not to just go around killing people or eating babies or whatever? That is definitely another one of the reasons, but I think that's a more modern reason that's been introduced because of religious apologetics. I don't think that's one of the main reasons why atheism is so disrupted. I think that's one of the more modern reasons, not one of the core reasons. But I would definitely agree it is one of the reasons.
I would say my take on it is it probably is the longest reason because it seems very primal. It seems very deep. If you listen to Jordan Peterson, his idea is that we've evolved with these different cultural adaptations around them, and our biology is kind of adapted to the cultural adaptations. So the belief in God as a conscience, that is a lot of what they talk about, I think is probably the oldest reason, but probably you're right in the fact that it's the reason that they most recently started articulating. They started making arguments. But I really think that is the heart of the reason why people distrust atheists. And I don't necessarily know that I'm interested. I don't necessarily know that there's a way around that. And the only reason why I focus on it is because I am very interested in looking at religion from an evolutionary perspective, and the fact that secular humanism is not, you're making the argument that it's growing incredibly fast. I'm saying Mormonism, like 15 million, that thing grew like a weed. So I think different religious systems have a way of attracting members that secular humanism can't necessarily take advantage of. And I think that may be a fundamental flaw in the ethic.
Well, I would disagree because the fastest growing religious ideology ever is Falun Gong, which is in China, which is a secular ethic, has nothing to do with a god, and it's the fastest growing ever in history. And so, but it was, of course, suppressed by the Chinese government because it was the fastest growing ever. So it's quite slowed down quite a bit more recently. But I'm pretty sure the non-religious are actually faster growing than Mormonism. Mormonism is very fast growing. I think it's growing at a rate comparable or slightly more than Christianity originally grew, but it's not as fast as the non-religious ethics.
So do you?
I forgot. You mentioned, how does humanism overcome this idea of, well, they don't really have this objective moral grounding? Well, that would be trying to create an objective model of morality, kind of in philosophy or something, a philosophical book to really establish an objective morality, solve the philosophical problems of objective morality that humanism can really rally around to have a core doctrine. That would be, I think, what humanism would need to do to try and solve that problem.
It's so easy to point to the God for grounding. I don't necessarily know. It's also easy to point to success and just the fact that Christianity is successful, and maybe they have inherited some of that, obviously, from the subjugation ethic. But it's hard to if something is successful and working, people often are reluctant to change. So I don't see us disagreeing on a ton of stuff. You obviously have the idea that secular humanism is gaining adherents and growing, and you could see a world where secular humanism is the dominant religion. They have, we're talking 4 to 5 billion or 4 to 5 million, and Christianity is 2 billion plus. That's 2,000 million for those paying attention. So I mean, there's a long way to go on secular humanism.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. There's been big strides that have happened when we have new scientific discoveries that override older beliefs. Like one of the things was Darwin. When Darwin discovered the evolution of species, that was a big hit to Christianity, and people started to lose adherence a lot more at that point, because that was essentially the earliest stage when atheism wasn't as strictly forbidden, like punishable by death. Like the last guys that were really convicted were like Galileo and Giordano Bruno and like Baron d'Holbach. He was persecuted in the 1700s, and Charles Bradlaugh was seen in a negative light, but I don't think he was persecuted. So getting to those like 1900s was really when atheism started to take off as a popular movement, because of things like Darwin and the scientific discoveries of the scientific method that reject a lot of the things that Christians believe, like refuting Genesis, that the world was not created in 7 days, the earth was not created before the sun and moon, those kinds of things. And so if we progress with these kinds of big scientific discoveries that make progress in refuting core Christian beliefs, that's what's really going to start to change the tide and make humanism a more popular religion, one of which would be like a philosophical understanding of objective morality. If we could solve that problem and get a secular objective morality that's better than the Christian morality, that would probably be a huge movement in the atheist direction.
I see we're obviously going to disagree there. I mean, I respect what you're saying and everything. One of my favorite quotes is Bertrand Russell. I actually pulled it out for this. Social cohesion is a necessity, and mankind has never yet succeeded in enforcing cohesion by merely rational arguments. So I don't know how you're going to make social cohesion work with just rational arguments. There seems to be so much of it is intuitive that I don't agree with you that that's a possibility. Really, the only way that we can objectively quantify this stuff is by the numbers. I did look it up, and Mormonism started in 1830, and secular humanism started in 1930. So they got 100 years on you. So maybe things will change. I'm not certain that they will. John Buck, I apologize. John Buck is the one that's moderating for us here. Do you want to jump in on anything? First, Tom, do you have any questions for me before I read super chats?
Well, you said you didn't get to any of your notes last time in the debate. Do you have any other notes that you wanted to mention?
Well, I have so many of there's so many missing variables in the experiment that you laid out that I think I touched on. I think really the structure of society that with the subjugation ethic that we're debating really breaks down to like a dictatorial society versus a pluralist society. And I think all the modern day evidence shows that the pluralistic societies have won out. So that to me is a little more evidence that the subjugation meme loses to the non-subjugation meme. Let's see. A constant battle that I have with a theist is whether or not the Nazis could have won the war, or whether or not their ethic is evolutionarily flawed and will always fail. And that ethic is the subjugation ethic.
I had a question about that I wanted to bring up. So,
Okay.
Suppose Hitler was doing the first guy to do research on the atomic bomb. If he was like essentially a year earlier in discovering the atomic bomb and succeeding with it, he would have won World War II. And that has nothing to do with the social ethic. Do you think that would make it possible that the Nazis could have won regardless of their ethic of subjugation?
Why did he lose the bomb? Because it goes back to my original argument. He lost the bomb because he lost his human resources that had the bomb. They threw the Jews fled Germany, and so many of those Jews were the Jewish scientists that came up with the bomb. Right?
Right. But just talking about technologically here, he could have, if he put more resources into it, more development resources into it, instead of putting it into his pagan research, he could have developed the bomb. He was close.
Okay. So just for the sake of argument, let's say he does, and you think he uses the bomb and America quits the war. I mean,
Right.
There's still so many factors at play. They're going to be still competing. I mean, he's not going to knock out, they're going to nuke a city. The bombs back then weren't, I mean, they were devastating, but I mean, they have the super bomb now, which is like 10 times as big as, or 100 times as big as the bomb that they dropped on Hiroshima. So they would probably take out New York or Washington. The thing about ethics that is interesting is because we're really talking about an evolution of ethics. And if you use the parallel of biology, like even if an asteroid hit and knocked us back to cockroaches, I think you and I would probably agree that cockroaches would eventually start evolving and we would just do it all over again, right? Like we would evolve.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the thing about ethics. So if my argument is really if Hitler won the war, if Hitler used a nuclear bomb, his ethic would still be flawed. It would be the equivalent of knocking cultural evolution back to cockroaches. But eventually, the stronger ethic, which is intelligence in the biological sphere, eventually that would evolve again. I'm equating kind of, you know, intelligence is such a biological advantage that it's impossible to believe that it wouldn't have evolved. I think the non-coercion ethic is such a powerful ethic that it's inevitable that it will evolve. So,
well, here's a question for you. Do you think the Christianity would evolve? Like if we just lost all memories of all Christianity or all religions, do you think those would evolve again, or they'd evolve new religions that are completely different?
I think they would. The thing about, see, I read this book, Beyond Revenge, and I guess revenge in societies is very hard to suppress. That inevitably people have conflict, and that conflict people don't forget. Like we're biologically structured to want to get revenge. It's in the biological, in the wild, in the raw biological environment. Getting revenge is the survival adaptation that works. In society, that doesn't work. That you have to suppress that ethic. And the whole idea behind cultural evolution is that we take on this culture that manipulates our biology and turns us from individual animals fighting against one another into a group, which has a huge survival advantage. The quote by David Sloan Wilson, it's actually David Sloan Wilson and Eric O. Wilson, is selfishness beats altruism within groups. Altruistic groups beat selfish groups, and everything else is commentary. So if obviously selfishness is a survival advantage if you can get one over on the group, but a group that cooperates is going to have such a survival advantage over any selfish individuals that they'll just banish them or kill them. So that is
I totally agree with you on that part. I meant like specifically, do you think that we would rediscover the idea that Jesus died at essentially 34 AD or whatever, and start worshiping this one guy named Jesus?
Not at all. He'd have a different
Okay.
name. He'd have, like, all that would be different. But Jesus is just the archetype for selflessness, right? I mean,
Right.
like the whole story just reeks of selflessness, right? Like you start off with a guy who's more powerful, God, right? Can do anything, right? But he doesn't. Like he loses. So, I mean, you don't get more selfless than that. And not only that, you know, Jesus is dying for everyone. He's dying for the entire group, the entire community. I mean, it is the archetype of selflessness. I mean, I can see guys going into battle and thinking that, like, I am going to die for my group. I am going to do this Christ-like act. And it motivates that kind of behavior. And I mean, I regret in our debate that I didn't bring up the movie 300. I don't know if you've seen the movie 300, but
Yes, quite a few times.
yeah. So the whole ethic of that movie 300, and I think I've seen that movie about 8 times. So it sounds like we have that in common. The whole ethic of that movie is that 300 free men will fight harder than thousands, tens of thousands of slaves. Like they play it out over 2 hours long. And eventually, you're right, they do die, but they have another set of, like, it buys them enough time that they end up eventually winning. So,
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that part. That that our general preclusions and intuitions will definitely regrow again if we died off and started the evolutionary adventure again. Those would definitely come back. And I definitely agree with you that the particulars of a specific guy named Jesus at a specific date, those probably would not.
The the biggest critique that I have of the secular humanists is that they're really not taking advantage of evolutionary principles to define to refine their ethic. I feel like there's a lot of science that's coming out now that is kind of proving ancient wisdom, kind of saying, okay, this is why Christianity has been around so long, because it has this archetype that fosters this pro-social atmosphere, and that pro-social atmosphere outcompetes less social pro-social atmospheres. I think where science today can be proving that ancient wisdom, I think a lot of times secular humanists or atheists or anti-theists, militant atheists, they really don't want to say that there's anything good out of religion, because their ultimate goal is just to abolish it, to outcompete it, to end it. And I think that is a huge mistake. So I'll just throw that out there. I don't know. I'll let you respond. And then
I totally agree. I think you're absolutely right. There are lots of really huge benefits that religion has provided, like one of which is an early form of education. This was just an idea that got parents to teach their kids all of these different values and give money to an institution that could then better teach everyone else the same values. The fact that you can do that with an idea is just an incredibly powerful thing. And if we could find a similar idea that'll work the same way in humanism, that would be like just the most greatest achievement for secular humanism ever. So you're absolutely right. The religious ethic, there's a lot that we can learn from it and a lot we should learn from it. And there's a lot that especially the feminist movement and the social justice movement are denying about that they really shouldn't be, that they're making mistakes in that regard.
Yeah. This is kind of the direction that I did a talk with Aaron Raw, and I had kind of hoped that this is the direction that conversation would go, because Aaron Raw is just so huge, and he's huge in the secular humanist movement too. So, I mean, it didn't go in that direction, but do you want to say anything before I want to give John a chance to if he has anything he wants to say or bring up.
Yeah, let's go to John. What does he have to say?
Yeah, cool. I wanted to, I guess, go back to the main thing that you guys really had a hard time getting through in your first debate with the convert or die scenario. I wanted to get your position right, Tom. You were thinking that, let's see, there might be a better ethical system that is just being subjugated by the one that was just in power from histories, like has gained it all these advantages, things like that. And so if there was, I don't know, something that could happen that could make it so that the old ethical system that was in power could die off, either through like the scientific
or they could just stop subjugating. They could stop having that ethic of subjugation and let it grow.
So are you, how much is, let's say, the ethics of Christianity like subjugating people in today's like modern societies, really?
Very little. Most of it is non-subjugation, but it's a pretty recent adaptation. Like within the past 150 years is when Christianity really stopped subjugating people. So it's pretty recent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. So from that, we can make a prediction that secular humanism, because it's not, there's no longer this external pressure kind of being placed upon them from the majority population, that this can now flourish because it's, for one, a more cost efficient really for the users to take on secular humanism rather than the Christianity with all its like sacrifices that you have to go through, and or not like real sacrifices, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. You got it exactly right. And that's essentially the two main reasons that most people are deconverting from Christianity. Are 50% of them, when polled, say they're deconverting because they reject the ideas and teachings of religious people, but 40 I think it was 43 or 46% of them are deconverting because they disagree with Christianity on social issues like LGBT rights and women's rights and abortion and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and you can see that even there was some guy that was like a doing studies on religious people from a secular perspective. He was realizing people were just moving between churches based upon their political issues rather than their actual like religiously held beliefs. So it's very much, I think, the greater ethical system that is in power right now is more akin to our political parties rather than our religious affiliations that we have. That's why you can have people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson, who's like agnostic and like Christian, full-on Christians, all kind of working together in this anti-SJW kind of movement or field that's kind of out there. Rather, and they still have this greater ethical system that's enforced, or not enforced, but that they're working. Yeah.
That's a really good question. Like, which is the greater ethic today? Christianity or republicanism or liberalism or atheism, secular humanism? Like, that's a good question that I don't know the answer to.
Yeah. Well, I think before the gay marriage stuff came into the zeitgeist, I think that there were liberal Christian churches and conservative Christian churches, and the conservative churches tended to be more the hellfire and brimstone, and the liberal were obviously the beatnik, not pacifist, nonviolent churches. But then when the LGBT thing came into existence, a lot of the liberal churches lost their membership. And I think the conservative churches maintain their membership. The person that John is talking about is Robert Putnam. That's he wrote a book called American Grace where he fleshes a lot of this stuff out. So I mean, it's a complex thing. And the numbers that I found on the 4 to 5 million secular humanists, I mean, they were even clear about saying we don't really have good numbers on how many secular humanists there are because there are so many different factions.
Subsets.
Yeah, exactly. So, and the problem of grounding something is one that I don't know can be overcome just as a technical challenge, because it's just so much easier for adherents to, I mean, it's easy to explain. It's like, don't do that, God's watching. It's like, how do you do that with secular humanism?
Well, that's one of the things I'm trying to solve. I wrote a model of secular objective morality, and trying to present that kind of a model that humanism can rally around would be like a replacement for the God idea. But I'm trying to ground it in reason and logic as opposed to supernatural beliefs.
Bertrand Russell is a pretty famous atheist philosopher. And Bertrand Russell is against you. I don't know. It's
everything seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela.
True. I do believe in the impossible. So I have one super chat from Pragmatic Culture. Thank you so much for the $5. He says ethics are objective because God. No joke. Aristotle. And he says gang, but I think he means yang gang. Which, yes, Yang gang all the way. I can't wait to see I can't wait to see the Yang Trump debate. So, did you pull any? Did you pull any other, John? Did you pull any other questions out of the chat that maybe people want to ask?
Yeah, I got one. This was from I didn't grab their name, but I guess it's kind of raising a question towards you, Tom. Like, how do atheists explain that their emergence in societies usually marks the end of that civilization? I'm not sure the particular examples that he's pointing to. Possibly Rome, maybe France and Russia, and I don't know, China, maybe. I'm not exactly sure if that's something that can be proven.
He's already admitted that there are cases where that has happened. So,
well, I would respond and say that if we look at modern societies that do have majority atheists, they're actually flourishing, not decaying. So there are definitely examples where certain kinds of atheism, when they rise in a society, like the state-enforced atheism of the Soviet Union and Mao and Pol Pot in Cambodia and China, those definitely do very badly. But the modern kind of atheism is far more beneficial to societies, like in Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Japan, especially those kinds of places where secularism is flourishing.
Okay, so
I did look up the stats on Iceland though, and it's 70% Lutheran. So you cook the books a little
Right.
bit on that.
That was just an example that popped into my head about the thing from Patheos, the satire example. So yeah,
yeah,
go ahead, John.
yeah, it's really hard for those European countries where a lot of them are almost like basically nominally Christian. Like you get baptized at birth, and then you like have all of the liberal secular values, things like that, but and never even really go to church except for maybe on Christmas, something like that. And that might be the secular humanism version of Christianity that's kind of taking full force in those types of places.
Well, I definitely agree that secular humanism adopts the positive aspects of Christianity, but it rejects the negative aspects, and there's a lot of negative aspects. So I definitely classify it as a separate kind of ethic because of rejecting all of those negative aspects of Christianity.
Now, I did have one potential objection for the true rise of secular humanism in society, or the flourishing of that as an ethos within society nowadays. Are you aware of the Pew research on the fertility rates of people by their religious, what they've put themselves down as religious?
Yes.
So most religious people at least meet the average fertility rate for the nation. So like for modern nations, in order to sustain the population size, there's a require 2.1 children per woman. That's basically the average that's needed out there. For all of the research into the non-religious, they always meet, or not always, but in what we have, it's usually down to 1.6, 1.8 in their different ranges. So I see that from the data we have right now, this is what I'm thinking is, within many religious societies, there is kind of this cultural value of having children. That's kind of something that is highly motivated within all of their group members, like, oh, when are you going to have kids? Something like that. That's something that is a particular value within the religious communities. I'm not sure if that value is something that is even, it's certainly not emphasized. It might even be de-emphasized in certain secular humanist ethos or communities that hold secular humanism, or not secular humanism, but a form of it, whether it be liberalism and atheism, something like that.
Right, you're right. When I'm talking about the better ethic, I'm talking about a voluntary choosing which ethic you want. And children, I wouldn't classify children into that voluntarily getting to choose their own religion category. So when I'm talking about which is the better ethic, I'm talking about, well, when you start with just a voluntary society of essentially adults, people who are intellectually established enough where they can make a decision, they choose secular humanism over the others, which is why secular humanism is growing. But you're right that the birth rates in the other religions are far higher than secular humanism. So they're going to grow more in population due to birth rates, just like in a similar way they would grow more to population due to
evangelization. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah. And I don't know, that's at least one point I see, that if we're hoping to have a coherent society between the secular and the religious, there might be that requirement that because as I see it, if the only way for secular humanism to grow its numbers in comparison to the rest of the population is by evangelization, essentially, or
deconversion.
Deconversion, really, from the already religious, then the religious people are going to see that, and they're going to want to build up stronger foundations to in order to avoid that. So they might even drop out of public schools, or they might not attend secular functions and things like that. And that's something perfectly within their capabilities of, if they have a strong enough community that they can all work off of from there. So that's at least, if it is the case that in order for society to continue, there might need to be this like organization or an understanding that the religious are the breeders and the secular humanists are the scientists or something like that.
Well, I'd
You
actually
know,
go back to the Darwinian example there, because a lot of societies have done that, and really religious societies is where measles is coming back, because they're anti-vaxxers, and so they don't take vaccinations, and so they're actually going to die off faster when they isolate themselves like that, and they go away from the scientific education, because with that scientific education comes a lot of advantages and in society and development and boosting your culture technologically and making you live longer. Like eventually, we're probably going to be able to sustain human lives for a lot longer than 100 years. So the population at that point won't really make a difference, because we'll essentially be able to live forever. And so whoever has the best technology is going to win out as the better ethic. And that's probably going to be the humanistic ethic, because we value science so greatly more than anything else.
I have a question for you, Tom. If we can, through science, validate ancient wisdom and come up with what we perceive to be as the best possible ethic, we have our list. Let's just make it 5 things. Non-subjugation is one of them. I think, forgiveness, I think, is probably high on the list. Like whatever that list is, we validate it by science. Like we can say this is the best ethic. If people are adopting that ethic for religious reasons, will secular humanists be able to accept that they have a different way of adopting the same ethic, or is the way that ethic is embedded into the culture, is that part of the secular humanist goal?
Well, most secular humanists don't care about what religious people believe. They just want religion out of politics. They don't want religion to influence politics. So most secular humanism are non-subjugation. They don't want to convert people out of Christianity. They don't want people to give up their beliefs. They just don't want their beliefs to influence the secular humanist kids or public schools or the public policy, those kinds of things. So most secular humanists are already happy to admit that. You can be religious all you want, not a problem.
Yeah, I think we're moving towards that. I think people are realizing that, like, people have an innate live and let live attitude. And they realize the public square is, if we stick to the facts and we don't, like, we can have our personal beliefs, but we don't argue that you should accept our personal beliefs to make the case for some public policy that we want. Like we should base our public policy on what we all agree on, and what we all agree on is, the objective world. So I think we're moving in that direction. I think the bottleneck there, what makes it so difficult, is that it's just in democracies, political power is gained through numbers, and religion definitely has a lot of adherents. So,
right, I totally agree.
I have another super chat. T Bra for $2 said, "Did he just equate the religious to anti-vaxxers?"
Well, pretty much everyone who is an anti-vaxxer is religious. It comes from 2 groups. One is fundamentalism Christianity and fundamentalism Islam. There are essentially no anti-vaxxers who are
as far as not necessarily. There's the New Age movement. There's a lot of anti-vaxxers within that are. The alternative medicine guys. Yeah, people like them. Those are largely not necessarily secular, but like Eastern, I guess, ideas, or that's I don't know, another form of the anti-vaxxer movement. But that's the thing. Like, when religion or the religious people are the majority population, and then some small subsection of that is also religious, then it's, I don't know.
So we've been going for about an hour and 15 minutes. I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up. I think we've got a lot of agreement here, which is good. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to say before we go?
Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation. I thought you're right. We have a lot of agreement on things, and you made some good points. And I still agree. I still think that Christianity is not what I would consider the best ethic, but I enjoy talking with people I disagree with. It's fun.
Yeah, I am super curious, just personally, what that best case ethic is. So, I mean, from a scientific point of view, this stuff completely fascinates me, and I could make tons of videos on the science of ethics, but so much of it is intuitive for people that it really offends their sensibilities when you disagree with them on anything ethical, or when you even try to look at it from a scientific perspective. So it's not a great strategy for growing your YouTube channel, but I find it fascinating. Do you want to say anything, John, before I end the stream?
Sure. Yeah, I'll actually be on the Modern Day Debate channel also. I'll be debating against Chris from Biblical History Skeptic on moral error theory. So, I'll be attempting to do so without having to rely upon God as the objective grounding for morality. So maybe, I don't know, maybe I might accidentally be helping Tom out in his secular humanism approach, but I don't know. So if anybody's interested in that, I'll be arguing against moral error theory. So,
well, we already have the numbers against Tom. All we have to do is call in the Mormons, and we can subjugate them however we please. So this has been a good talk. I'll go ahead and end the stream there. Thanks so much for the super chats. Let us know in the comments below if you have any thoughts on this. I have a feeling Tom and I are going to probably end up debating on something else eventually in the future, since both of us seem to be into the debate thing, and we've both been on Modern Day Debate a couple times now. So let us know if you think there's anything interesting we could have a conversation about. So I'll go ahead and end it there. Thanks so much. If you like the video, obviously like the video, and we'll catch you next time. We'll see you in the next video.